Ross Pearson, and Stephen is my supervisor, along with Professor Anne Nicholson from Monash University. I'm probably into my fourth full-time year of a PhD, but I think I've been doing it for about 5 to 6 years now because I'm predominantly part-time. My focus has been around the elicitation process, particularly around the structured, the qualitative elements of a Bayesian network. And a lot of my work's sort of been inspired by the Delphi protocol, and more recently a project we did with Monash called BaSE, which is again an elicitation technique for getting experts to generate Bayesian networks to solve real-world problems. And then even more recently, another protocol called the IDEA protocol that came out of the University of Melbourne, and a couple of people here, including Anchor and Stephen, also worked on that. So that's sort of the motivation. And yeah, I'll share a few slides now, and we'll just go through what I'm going to present today. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep, all good.
All right, so what is this? It's called the BaSE protocol, or Bayesian Network Structure Elicitation. And what is it exactly? It is a protocol, so it's a methodology, but I'll also be showing you a bit of computer software that allows you to implement this elicitation method. As I mentioned, it's sort of been inspired from the Delphi process, the BARD platform, and the IDEA protocol. So a lot of the learnings from those techniques have been carried forward. It is a group elicitation technique. You could absolutely use it for solo elicitation, but it's focused around group elicitation. And the couple of reasons why I focused on this as a problem is that generally there's not a lot of literature or work towards doing the structured component of Bayesian network. So there's quite a bit around the parameters or the quantitative elements, but as I said, not a lot around the structure. And what I found in my experiences when working on elicitation work is that we didn't do a lot in terms of documenting how we came up with the structure. So a lot of that knowledge that we captured from experts tended to be lost or changed along the way, but without necessarily us documenting how we came to those decisions. So the motivation behind this is A, to provide people with a structured way of approaching elicitation, but also to be able to keep a record of all of that metadata and provide some transparency of the elicitation process in the future. So what is the scope of this protocol? For those not familiar with Bayesian networks, although I'm going to just assume most people are, that a Bayesian network consists of a few pieces, but it's mainly a list of variables, relationships between those variables, and then a set of parameters or probability distributions that express the strength of those relationships. Now, for this protocol, we're only focusing on the variables and the structure, and we don't focus on parameter elicitation. The main reason for that is that there's already a great number of literature and platforms that allow you to do the parameterization. There's no reason why that this platform couldn't be expanded to either do the parameter elicitation or just hook in to other platforms that do. But just to note that we're only going to focus on the generation of the graph, the visual graph itself today. So a couple of things for those that aren't familiar with Delphi. The idea behind Delphi is it's a group elicitation technique that seeks to ameliorate biases in human nature when we're giving our judgments. So when you have a group of people, that group of people can easily be influenced by other people in the room. Perhaps one of those people is my superior or my supervisor, and I might defer my general opinion in favor of theirs. So this is just one example of a bias that can occur. The Delphi process seeks to provide people some anonymity when they're providing their judgments so that they can be somewhat protected from some of those biases. And in the effort to get a fairer and more representative judgment from a diverse set of individuals. So to that end, Delphi is pretty straightforward. There's sort of three iterative steps that can be repeated multiple times. But the first step is that people go away and work on the problem individually in private. So they are given the problem and they attempt to provide a judgment over the problem without discussing it with the group. That set of judgments across the group of participants is then aggregated, and then everyone comes together in a group and discusses it publicly in a group forum. And that process is repeated over and over until we land on either a consensus opinion or at least we converge on some form of group judgment that can then be used for a downstream decision. The last thing I'll note here, and then I'll swap over to the platform, is for the purpose of this protocol, there's really only two roles that we'll be talking about. One is the facilitator. This is the person that's coordinating the overall elicitation process. And the other is the participant, and they're the ones that are actually contributing their expert judgment in the effort of building a Bayesian network. I'm going to move on to the platform, but I'll just stop there. I know that was a bit of ground to cover quickly, but we've only got a little bit of time today. So I'll stop and give the audience a chance to ask any questions they have around Bayesian networks, group elicitation techniques, or what we're about to get presented on.
Hi, Ross. It's Helen here. Not a
Hey,
question. Do you want to change your slides? We can't see them in presenter mode. We're seeing the ones down the side as well.
Oh, these ones here?
Yeah, more of a question than more of a comment than a question.
Okay, that's probably fine because Ross will switch to the.
Yeah, I'm going to jump out anyway. But I'll note that for future, that it's easier to see. I can't do presenter mode on my screen. You'll see why, but it kind of makes it too big. Does that make it, so that was, there was a rationale that I did it. But thanks, Helen. Does anyone have any other questions? Otherwise, I might get straight into it. Okay. So this is the platform, the BaSE platform. The idea is that it's user and password protected, gated, because we want people to sign on individually, and we want to keep track of their judgments or any content that they've elicited. You're able to be assigned a facilitator account or a participant account. I'm going to log in with a facilitator today, and I'm going to show you mostly the facilitation view of the world, just so I don't have to jump back and forth between different screens. So I'll just give you a quick orientation. The way that this works is pretty common to most sort of software platforms. There's a menu structure here for navigating through the various pages. You'll see a number of panels or frames that appear on each page. You can minimize those if you don't want to see them, and they'll just appear in this toolbar here, or you can expand it by double clicking it. There's a few options around, toggling the look and feel and changing your layout preferences, but we'll just settle for this today. Now, as I said, there's really only two phases that we're accomplishing in this platform. One is to elicit variables, and the other is to elicit the structure. Now, you could choose to do these independently, or you could choose to use the platform to do both of them. And so clicking on either one of these will take us to both of those pages. Now, there's not much for me to do right now, and that's because I haven't created any problems. So everybody will see these two pages, no matter whether you're a facilitator or a participant. But the facilitator has some additional capabilities that other people cannot. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on this facilitation page, but I've just loaded up a completely fresh and empty version of the tool. So if you were to log on as a facilitator for the first time, this is pretty much what it would look like. So with a Bayesian network, we need to start with a crisp problem statement. And so what I will do is create a new problem. I'm going to create a problem that's very simple and easy to understand. And the reason I've chosen a very easy problem is just so I can focus more on the procedural elements of the protocol today. But hopefully this is not above anybody's heads. So I'm just going to set up the problem quickly, and then I'll talk about what that problem is. So what I'm doing here is a couple of things. I've selected a problem statement. I could create my own, but I've got a pre-saved one. I'm going to set this facilitator participates to on. You may often not want your facilitator to also be participating, but in the case of today's demonstration, it's going to be a lot easier for me to show you the dual role of a facilitator who also participates in the elicitation process. And so once I've done that, my new problem gets created. Now there's a few things I need to do. The first is that I need to add some users. At the moment, the only user that's been added was the facilitator, which is myself, but I've got no other users part of my process. So I'm going to just create a couple of users here, and just give me a second because I'm going to log on to another screen with this user so I can do some stuff in the background. Okay, so I might create one more user, and as I said, a password's assigned, so we can sort of create as many users as we want and allocate those passwords out. There's a few controls here that allow you to reset passwords, delete users, things like that. You can also, this is also integrated with email, so you can invite people to also use the platform with an email account, but it's not necessary to have an email account to use this. So these users are all just problem-only users, and their account will only be relevant to this one problem. The other thing that I might want to do before I start is create a list of seed variables. So you may or may not want to do this when you're listing, to provide a couple of variables to help ignite the elicitation process. Now, before I do that, I'll just talk about the problem so everyone can contextualize an example of what we're going to try and do today. So I've got this problem viewer. You'll see this on most pages. This was the problem that I uploaded earlier. I'm just going to read the first line of the problem statement to you so everyone's got a brief idea of what we're trying to solve for here. So the question we're trying to answer is my lawn wet? You've woken up in the morning, but it is still dark. You, for some reason, want to know if your lawn is wet, but you don't want to get out of bed. Why not build a Bayesian network to solve this problem for you? Okay, so as I said, very, very basic question. We're trying to know whether our lawn is wet, and we're going through the process of eliciting that answer by building a Bayesian network through this group elicitation technique. So a couple of things that will help me is the target variable itself, which is the lawn actually wet? And perhaps maybe was it raining recently? And I'll add one more, have the sprinklers been on? So perhaps knowing any of these will give me a pretty good indication of whether the lawn is wet or not.
Could I just quickly check? So
yeah, of course.
Is that readable to everyone? Like, can everyone see that? Okay.
It's a little bit blurry, but you can kind of make it out.
Let
the text.
Let me just reduce my screen size then.
That helps a lot.
And that will hopefully help a bit more.
Okay, cool. Well, good.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. How is that looking now?
Yeah, that looks much better.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks, Stephen. That was a good call. All right, so now I'm pretty much ready to go. I've created my participants. I've created a set of seed variables, and I've got a problem statement. So now it's pretty straightforward. Obviously, offline from the platform, I'm going to coordinate with my participants to meet at a certain time and place. As you can see, this is generally designed around doing this online in a synchronous manner, but there's no reason why you couldn't do this asynchronously, or you could do it in a workshop room with everyone having an individual computer. So a couple of variants, but for the purpose of this, just imagine that we're all doing this remotely in a synchronous fashion. So I've coordinated with my participants. We're all going to meet and do a workshop at a certain point in time. And so at the beginning of the workshop, I'm ready to commence. So I'll start the problem. And so now the problem's ready to go, and we've got our team of participants ready to start eliciting. They've been explained what the problem statement is, and they're ready to start building out a list of variables. So as I said, this is the facilitation view. What the participants see is a little bit different, but as I am a participant that's also a facilitator, I'm pretty much seeing the same thing. So this is the first entry point for the participants. They're presented with a very simple table. It's the list of variables that we previously created. The participants now are instructed to try and think of any other variables that might help them answer the questions presented in the problem statement. So as a participant, I'm going to perhaps add one more. Maybe my lawn is green. Okay, maybe that helps me know if it's wet. And I've got another screen open, and I'll just flick to this very quickly. I won't do this very often, but I just want to give you an idea of, I think this is it. So this is me with my other participant. I'm going to go into my problem here. You'll note that I can't see the green lawn variable that was added by the facilitator participant because I'm in my private round and I don't want any undue influence. So perhaps I think that I can think of a couple of other things that might help me if I had that information, if I look out the window, and I might say greenery here as well, and we'll come to that. So just to let you know, this is the idea. We've got multiple people with different windows, and they're working on their own individual private round at this point in time. So going back to the facilitator view, as I said, I won't jump between screens very often. Now, each participant has this option to identify when they think they're ready and they're finished, so they can click I'm ready to continue. And so I'll do that with both the facilitator and the other participant. Just for and I'm going to jump back to this facilitator view. So as a facilitator, I'm going back to control my actual elicitation process now. I'm going to have a little look at what's going on here. So I don't need to worry about my problem users anymore because I've already created those. I'm going to just minimize that for the rest of the problem, and I'm just going to focus on other bits of information. So this round participation status just gives me a list of who's working and what they're up to. So here I can have a quick look at my participants. If you didn't know what the SM stands for, it stands for Stephen Mascaro, and OW stands for Owen Woodbury. So they're my dummy participants for today. But in this case, I can see that Stephen's created 5 variables and he's indicated that he's finished his step 1 process. It doesn't look like Owen's participating at all. And as a facilitator, I now have a choice to decide when I want to move to the next step. So as I said, and I'll just remind everyone that we're following a process of doing a private round, doing an aggregation process, and then doing a public round. So the system will take care of that aggregation step, and not a lot happens on the first round for aggregation. But it will then jump straight past the aggregation step once it's processed it and move to the group phase or the public round. So all participants are then sent to this new round. The tool then lets you know where we're currently at. So I'm still at phase variable. I'm still at round 1, but I'm now doing step 2, and step 2 is this public round that I mentioned before. I know that this will be a little bit confusing, but once you've done it a few times, you'll get pretty familiar with the phase, round, and step nomenclature. So going back to the participant view, we start to see something new. So this is where the facilitator's view and the participant's view differs. So I'm here as a facilitator, not a participant, and the facilitator has a job to do. What happens when a lot of people come back with a bunch of variables is you'll commonly get duplicates or similarly named variables. And at this point, quite a bit of discussion happens around what these variables actually might mean, what did the participants mean by them, etc. So what the role of the facilitator here needs to do is actually consolidate this list. Now, I've deliberately put a couple that are similar. So Greenie and Green Lawn, let's just assume that at this point, the public discussion that took place, the consensus was that these two could be consolidated into a single variable. And so the tools here are to enable that process to happen. And at this point, the facilitator can provide further description if they so desire, based on the discussion. So the description can contain the discussion notes. And the idea is to work through this list until we have a consolidated list of variables that everyone understands the definition and agrees makes sense. And again, one of our main motivations here was to remove duplicates. And this will be the last time I do this, but I'm going to just quickly jump to the participant view at this time, because you might be wondering what they're doing. They're unable to do anything. So they have read only. They're able to see all of the changes the facilitator's making. But again, this is more of a group discussion round at this point in time. So the facilitator is engaging with the group to try and encourage discussion and clarification around each of the variables. Now, last time I'll jump back. So at this point, we've finished or concluded the group round for group step for round 1. And the facilitator now has the ability to move this to round 2. Now, at this point, the idea behind this process is everything becomes kind of iterative past this point. So we're just going to go and repeat the same process that we've just done. And the reason that we want to do this is usually as people get together and think about the problem statement, they then come up with more ideas. Oh, that might have been a good variable, or I might want to add something else here. And so we ask them to go back and reconsider what other variables they might have missed. Now, there's another really practical reason for this as well. What we found during elicitation is quite often, if you ask people to elicit 30 variables all in one hit, it becomes just a bit too cognitively overwhelming. So what can be a nice technique is to ask iteratively, let's just work on your top 5. What are the top 5 most important? And then in the next round, you ask them, what's your next 5? That way it doesn't become such an overwhelming task, and you can sort of iterate through this process in sort of nice, discrete blocks. But I'm going to proceed now to the next round. You can either do it from here, but I'll do it from the facilitation panel, just to see that we've now jumped up to round 2, okay? And we've gone back to the private, or this current step, the private round. And so there's only a small change here that wasn't there before. In addition to the variables, we've now got the ability to score. So the idea here is that we'd like participants, now that they've got the group consolidated list, to put in some numbers about how valuable that particular variable is in terms of helping them answer the question that they want to know. So in this case, we want to know that our lawn is wet. So it's probably the most valuable. If I know that, I really don't need to know anything else, because that's already answering my question. So the scoring range we use is between 1 to 10, and 1 being this variable is not at all helpful in answering my question, 10 being this is very, very helpful. And so I'm going to go through and put some numbers against each of these variables. I think for sure, if I know that my lawn is wet, then that answers my question. So that by far is the most informative a variable could be. But if I knew the sprinklers were on or if it was raining, I think those are two very helpful variables as well. I'm not sure knowing that the lawn is green immediately tells me if it's wet, but it might be still useful if I don't know anything else. And similarly, I think the clouds might be an indicator that it might have rained if I don't know that it actually rained or not. So everybody's asked to do this process, and so my participants are filling out their own scores for each of the variables. As I said, you can continue to add more variables at this point in time. Let's see. I'll just add a water outage or something. And so it is possible to continue to add variables. Again, if you add a variable, the other participants won't see it at this point in time. So I'm not going to worry about it, but you can also vote on that at this point in time. So as the facilitator, I can go back and keep track of my progression status. So I can see that everyone's working their way through their votes. The Ross users finished 6 votes, so they've added an additional variable. The Stephen user's done 5, and the Owen user hasn't voted at all. So this isn't a reflection of Owen's normal participation on elicitation. So just to note, I think he's normally very, very productive, but in this case, he's not very helpful for us. Okay, so that sort of helps me. As I said, I just as my Stephen user click the complete button, so I can also see when users complete. So I'm going to go to the next step at this point. Again, we've now completed the second private round, and some aggregation has taken place, and we're going to the consolidation or group discussion round. So again, pretty similar. The only difference here is we can now see the aggregated scores. We don't know who scored what exactly, but we can at least see what the group scoring is of particular variables. So we can see that the wet lawn is the preferred or the strongest variable in terms of ranking, and we can see all of the other scores. So I'm not going to keep repeating this process, but from this point forward, each round is identical, and you can just choose as the facilitator how many of these that you want to do. But the idea is that you're trying to land on a set of variables that's useful for building a Bayesian network. Now, at this point, there's a couple of things I can do, but let's say I've finished my variable elicitation. I'm ready to move into the structured elicitation step. At this stage, I need to make a decision as the facilitator with the group on which variables we're going to carry forward. Now, since I've only got 6 variables, I think this is fine. I'm going to keep all variables and bring them forward. But if I were to think I had too many, I can remove variables at this point in time. Note that all of our previous variables that the participants have added are still saved in the database. So we've still got access to all that information and discussion, but for what the purpose of bringing forward to the structure phase, I can choose. So I'm just going to actually.
I'll just note there's maybe another 5 minutes. If you want to.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. That's helpful with the timing. Okay, so I'm gonna at this point as the facilitator, I'm ready to move to the next phase. So I'm carrying those variables forward to this phase. So these are the 3, long story, but these are 3 that I've carried forward for the purpose of just showing you this next step. So the idea here now is, in fact, I might add another one. The idea here now is to build the actual graphical structure of the Bayesian network. So we have the list of variables that we raised in the previous one. I'm adding a couple of extras. And the idea here is that each participant now gets to build a Bayesian network, or at least the qualitative component of one. So we're now on the structure phase page, and it's pretty straightforward. I just drag my nodes and drop them onto the panel. And I'm not going to talk to people about the actual process of building a Bayesian network, but this is the goal for our participants. They don't need to know too much about it. Obviously, through the elicitation protocol, I would strongly recommend that you provide them some instructions at the beginning of the process. But just from a time perspective, I won't go over the actual protocol steps today, and I'm just going to focus on the BN. So I'm going to start building a BN with some of these nodes. Okay, so the idea here is that I'm trying to put my graph together, and I've got a few little things that you might not be familiar with other BN software. So there's a couple of things that just these zones are, if you drag from the green to a node, it will create an arc. If you drag from the gray, it will move the node around. And I'll just hide those because they can look a little bit clunky. And we've got some additional metadata controls as well and some arc controls. So if I don't like an arc, I can delete it by double clicking on the bin, but I can always re-add it. And we've got these little comment fields. So we can annotate both nodes and arcs, and that becomes a helpful way of just recording people's thoughts about why they added an arc, perhaps. One other feature, but I won't spend too much time on it, but it is possible to ask participants to change the relationship type, and that will come into play with the aggregation process, which I'm not going to cover today. But for the sake of today, we're just going to stick with direct arcs, causal arcs. Okay, so I'm just quickly going to jump onto my other participant and create a model there. Okay, so once everyone's built their models, the facilitator now has a similar sort of process of seeing how many variables and arcs were added to the model and who's completed it or not. And when they're ready, they can progress to the next step. So that first step was a private round where people were working independently. We're now moving on to our group round. So there's a little bit going on here, and I'll just try and make this a little bit more simpler. But the idea here is that every participant can now see everybody else's model. And so what we're going to ask the participants to do is vote for each model on how well they think that model represents the problem. And so I'm just going to, sorry, Owen, I don't like your model at all. And so we can come up with various voting. And we use a very similar scoring technique from 1 to 10, and it's how well does the model represent the problem. So every participant will be asked to do the same thing and create those votes. And I'll just do that with my other participant quickly. And I know I'm just about out of time and we'll just be done very soon. And so that's pretty much a very similar process to what we did with the variables, but also with the structure. Now there's one extra thing that the, sorry, I need to expand out my screen for a second. One extra thing that the facilitator needs to do, which is people are free to add variables at each step. And so they need to repeat that consolidation process if we have, so here we've got sprinklers that have been duplicated, for example. And so they'll then need to merge those into the same one. The reason we want to merge them is that we can then, everyone's arcs and nodes get retained, so we don't lose that, and that we're actually making a conscious decision to say these two nodes are equivalent. And then again, that's pretty much it. The facilitator can then iterate through the rounds. And once they've gotten to that point where each participant's satisfied with their BNs and they're not going to change them anymore, or their DAGs, we then would finalize the problem and do a process of aggregation. Now, I don't have aggregation here to show you today, so we're going to stop there. But the idea would be you can either extract the participant BNs directly into, say, Netica format, or you can do the aggregation step, which consolidates them into a single representative Bayesian network, or you can extract the adjacency matrix. So there's a bunch of things that we can do to extract the content out, but the intent for the platform at this point is to pretty much finish here after the BNs are aggregated and allow you to bring those into your most preferred modeling tools, be it Netica or Genie or etc. That's it from me today. I'm going to stop there. I think I've probably gone over time, but back to you, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Ross. So yeah, obviously, I think, the work here looks great. I'm really happy with it as a supervisor. Now I'm just going to throw open to anyone who's here basically for questions. If you want, you can kind of turn on your camera and microphone, or just your microphone if you like. Dan?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Ross. And seems like a really helpful bit of software, especially if you have experts that don't really know much about BNs. I just want to ask, if I wanted to use this for my own BNs, what would be the timeline in terms of when I could access it?
Yeah, it's good questions. It's actually ready now. So it's deployed in AWS. So I can give you a URL, but maybe give me a week, because I want to just put up a clean database and set up the database replication so that if you were to use it, you won't ever lose anything. That's really the only thing I have outstanding. So yeah, but if you were just to email me and you wanted to use it, I could certainly get it to you in about a week, and then that will just be and then it's as simple as me just giving you a facilitator user.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ross.
Excellent. Helen, did you have a question or just the camera? Oh, cool. Yue.
Thanks, Ross. Are you planning to do any facilitator training at all? Does the facilitator need some level of training, one in terms of facilitating the actual session, but like typical questions that you can ask to facilitate discussion, or how much domain knowledge they need to have in order to facilitate a very complex problem?
Okay, yeah, great question. So what sits behind this tool is a bit more of an extensive protocol, which I didn't cover today. So there is a bunch of recommendations on how you should elicit, but I believe you can use the tool without having deep knowledge of the protocol. In terms of training, at some point it's my intent to allow people to be self-trained in the platform, a tutorial. At this point, I'd be happy. It wouldn't take me more than 10 or 15 minutes to give people an overview. It's pretty straightforward. And then if people want to understand BNs and elicitation more in general, then I would recommend they attend one of Stephen's workshops, which he does regularly. In fact, there's one, when is it, Stephen? Next week?
This Friday. Well,
this Friday.
Workshop, yep.
So, and that's more of how to elicit in general. In terms of the nuances of the protocol, I think there's quite a bit here, but yeah, I think there's a few learnings again. Perhaps once the PhD is written and publicly available, although that might be a bit much for people to actually digest, but it will be available. And then, yeah, ultimately, yeah, I think that would be a good idea if I could, and I'd be happy to run some facilitation training workshops for this particularly as part of BNMA, if you'd like that. So that would be possible.
I should note that the thesis will have a version of the protocol, and basically something that you can follow step by step to go through the protocol. Oh, any other questions? I have one quick question, potentially. Have you given any thought to devolving the role of the facilitator? So basically not having a facilitator? Yeah,
to a self-organized group.
Yep.
The only challenge I've got at the moment is that consolidation of variables step, which I think without it becomes a bit messy because people aren't talking the same language at that point. So I think that would be the one problem that I'd need to solve for. I mean, there is an opportunity with large language models to do some of that work and automate it, but you still need to, and then I suppose people could self-agree and use the large language model in real time. There is a large language model attached to this tool. So the intent was to slowly, I'll just share that really quickly. So there is an LLM here that you can actually, but at the moment, it's simply just a chat interface. The reason for this is I think sometimes it's useful to clarify things, and I want to keep the history of any conversation so we have that metadata, because I know we actually have gotten to the habit occasionally of using ChatGPT in elicitation sessions. So this would be my recommendation. But yeah, hooking this capability in to actually do automate some of those tasks that a facilitator might have done would then potentially allow it to be fully self-elicited, which would be great. I should say, without that consolidation of variables step, I can't aggregate the BN. so to me, that's probably the most important thing for the facilitator to do at this stage.
Yeah, so that would definitely need to be solved first, basically. Excellent. Okay. Very quickly, was there any other questions? Otherwise, we might wrap up. So thanks, Ross. Thanks. That was a really great session. I think we've got, as Ross mentioned, you can follow up with Ross, to try out the interface separately as well. Any other questions and so forth?
Has everyone got my Monash email? I suppose it's on the invite.
Yeah, we can send. Well, if people get in touch with us, then we can pass on your details just to save